I was jokingly saying, listen, unless CZ and Gabriel Abed, who's the chairman of Binance, want me to do this and be CEO, I'm not going to do it. I was at Millennium, and I was really one of the first people on Wall Street to be going around and pitching people at different hedge funds and pitching the idea of Bitcoin. And this is in 2013 and 14 when Bitcoin was between kind of $50 and $300. We're the largest today holder of BNB in the world, and hopefully the largest holder of any treasury in the world. And hopefully we can continue to maintain that lead.
Hello, and this is Constantin Kogan. I'm your host at Holistic Investments. And finally, I have an amazing guest today, David Namdar, who is a CEO of CA Industries. Hi, David.
Hey, Constantine.
You're a good friend, and we've been planning to do it for so long. So I'm really excited that we finally have the chance to talk. We're going to talk about your journey, who you are as a person, who you are as a professional. But before, I promise you that traditionally we're going to throw a legal disclaimer that all the information we're going to reveal in this podcast is only for informational purposes. You should not construe any such advice as tax, investment, or legal. So now we're off the hook. We can talk about anything we want. I do have a personal question for you. Since I've listened to other interviews of yours, so I decided that how do you want to be called? So I have options here. BNB Daddy, BB, which stands for Big BNB Energy, BNB Treasury Czar, or BNB Final Boss.
Interesting. I haven't been asked that yet. I'm going to go with, I think BNB Final Boss is, that's the most relevant right now. So I've been seeing all the videos of him in Ibiza. So.
Exactly. Okay. Yeah. So first of all, we're going to add it to your haircut. So that will be relevant to the BNB Final Boss. Perfect. So now.
I've seen they've made a bunch of memes of CZ as the final boss. So
CZ and Brian Armstrong also, that was very popular. Okay. So first of all, I want to know who you are, right? And for the audience, right? Because technically you're a veteran in the industry. You've been over 10 years, you've been to many companies. We've met during the time of your Galaxy Digital tenure when you were the co-founding member. I remember when Novogratz went in Bagatelle, we were dancing on the table. It was after 2017-18, the bull run, everyone was so happy. But I want people to know, what was your journey initially? Where did you come from? How was your this decision to even come to CryptoShape?
Yeah. So, and first of all, I'm so excited to be here with you because I know in the last 2-3 years you've been asking me to do this, and I didn't feel like I wasn't ready. I was keeping a lower profile. I think I told you I didn't have something I was excited enough to talk about, and I wanted to hold off till that, and so that's why we're here now. And so. For me, it has been a long journey. And as you say, veteran, so it's been a number of battles and a number of cycles. And we've lasted throughout. And I think the starting point for me was I grew up in New York, and then I started my career out in Hong Kong. And I worked at a bank out there covering all of the Asian markets. And so I really got to see beyond just equities, FX, I got to see the nuances of different countries and cultures and moving money between them. And then when I'd moved back to New York, I was working at one of the biggest hedge funds, Millennium, still covering the Asian markets, but really trading globally. And the idea of Bitcoin, when I first heard of it, right, of a currency born from the internet, and a currency that was really limited in supply and all these properties that were like gold, it immediately resonated with me. And so,
what was the year when you first heard about it?
So I first heard about it in 2011. Although, even for a lot of the people who've been as early as I have, plenty of mistakes made along the way, and I'm happy to share a couple of them.
Did you buy?
I didn't buy in 2011. The very first interaction I had with it was I sent a message to an investor group that I had from college. I went to USC, so it was a Trojan investor group. And I sent a message to them of an article that I saw on Bloomberg or somewhere else that was, the world's fastest growing currency isn't a currency at all. Bitcoin has gone up 3,000%. It was from $1, $3 to $30, and then crashed back down to $3. And I shared it with that group, and I said to them, I think we should try to figure out how to get some of this, but just be careful. I wouldn't suggest putting any money into it, but maybe you can find a way to earn some free ones online. And so again, I was early. I didn't see it the right way immediately, but then luckily I started buying the next year in 2012, and then I've been involved in getting deeper and deeper in crypto ever since.
Do you remember the first exchange where you made your purchase?
I actually, the first way I got involved with the industry was going to some of the earliest Bitcoin meetups here in New York, and went to something called Bitcoin NYC, and then Satoshi Square, which was started by a couple friends of mine. So we used to gather in Union Square and down on Wall Street and get together and kind of do peer-to-peer trading of Bitcoin. And even then, it was some of the first times a friend of mine would pull out his laptop, open up his Linux, and be interacting with Bitcoin and buying and selling Bitcoin directly.
So tell us a little bit about your journey from there, 2011, 2012, and then the moment you got to Galaxy Digital.
Sure. So there's a whole chapter of crypto cycle before that even. And so I was at Millennium, and I was really one of the first people on Wall Street to be going around and pitching people at different hedge funds and pitching the idea of Bitcoin. And this is in 2013 and 14 when Bitcoin was between kind of $50 and $300 and briefly spiked to 1,200 during Mt. Gox, end of 2013. And I was still at the hedge fund then, and I actually tried to pitch the firm itself on doing a Bitcoin strategy. And I'd said to a couple of the partners there, the head of the trading desk, at this point, I was one of the best people who had the most experience of crypto, what limited experience there was to have, and Wall Street trading. And I said, I think we should be opening up and starting to trade and investing in Bitcoin and other crypto assets. And the partner said to me, he's like, all right, can you do 100 or 200 million aside? Meaning get long 200 million and short sell 200 million to have a hedged exposure. And I said, you can get long. I mean, it'll be difficult, but I could get long a couple 100 million, but there's no short side. And so they said to me it was too early, not interested.
Too risky.
And too risky. And then I went out to create that short side of the market. And I set up my first company in the space called SolidX in 2014.
And maybe you can explain a little bit what
Sure.
SolidX was doing back in the day.
And so the idea for SolidX was it was a niche investment bank focused entirely on digital assets. And we were trying to create that short side of the market using total return swaps. So that was something that I traded while I was at Millennium and while I was at UBS before. And really what total return swaps are, it's a way to get exposure to a difficult to access market or a difficult to access asset class. So I had done that sometimes I would trade a total return swap through a bank in Hong Kong to get exposure to an equity or an asset in Korea or in Indonesia, or again, difficult to access markets. And so we were trying to create that for Bitcoin and then Ethereum. And we did a couple of transactions, but unfortunately the lesson from then was we were a bit too early because it was soon after the financial crisis. So a lot of the biggest banks and hedge funds didn't want to interface against a small startup dealing with Bitcoin. And so, we were kind of pitching it as the birth of a new asset class. So we actually, in 2014, we also put out some of the very first research ever on Bitcoin and digital assets as a new institutional asset class. And so a lot of interesting insights, even from back then. I have to pull up that research report and share it a bit more. And then the other major thing that we tried to do, we were the second group in the world to try to do a Bitcoin ETF. And so that was second to the Winklevoss twins, who now have set up Gemini and are actually taking that public soon as well. And so from back then, we started it within a couple of weeks of each other. And we had the thought, all right, this is the perfect thing. There was recently a gold ETF. It's a perfect way to bring it to the US capital markets, let investors come in. It's hard to access. It's hard for people to buy and sell it, to custody it, all of those things. And we thought, okay, this might cost a couple of $1 million, might take 10 years, and we still might not get it approved. Well, it turned out that was exactly right. And now 10 years later, last year, finally the first Bitcoin ETFs were approved, and now those are the fastest growing ETFs ever.
And yeah, we're very, very different infrastructure, very different sentiment of the market. So, but in retrospect, looking back, you have this incredible experience, and I'm sure the conversation with investors back in the day and now is completely different. But if you were to teleport, back in the day, what would be your advice to your younger self? What would you change? What would you do differently?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think, I have this conversation sometimes with people that were early in crypto. And when I say the two kinds of people that benefited the most or have had the most success in crypto were either young and dumb enough to be all in. They'd never worked in something else. They all of their experience. They were still living in their parents' basement. They had no expenses, so they were able to be all in on crypto. Or they were rich enough where they had someone like me or you convince them to buy in, and then they put in 1, 2, 5% of their assets into it, and then they forgot about it for long enough, and they had other exposure, other businesses they were running, and eventually that became 200, 300, 500% of their assets, and became the majority of their wealth, and then they were pulled all into crypto. And so I would kind of tell myself the same way I tell a lot of people, is that to have a longer term mindset, and when you have conviction in something, really set yourself up to buy and hold it for the long term.
Oh, that's a smart, I would say, advice. Let's come back to the Galaxy Digital. So like what was this
Sure.
chapter after you already like established your own firm? Like, I don't know if you exited this, like, or what happened there? Like, how do you get to, Galaxy Digital right now also recently went public, right? So very big success. And I'm sure you helped shape the entire philosophy there, like, the trading desk. So can you talk a little bit more what led you to become part of this? And later we're going to talk about your current status.
Of course. So for me, one of the special things about the crypto world to me is that I've always been a connector, and almost a super connector in some ways, and just somebody, I like to be at the center of a lot of chaos. And I've pulled in like yourself, and I've helped pull a lot of people into the crypto space, and whether that's getting jobs in the space, investing in the space, starting companies. So again, from the very beginning, even actually a nice story I shared only once was in 2013 and 14, as I was starting my first company, SolidX, Arthur Hayes was a friend of mine from out in Hong Kong. We both started our careers out there working at different banks. He came to me for help raising some of his initial capital for BitMEX. And for a period of time, that was actually one of the few investments that outperformed Bitcoin from back in the day. And so unfortunately, had I stayed at the hedge fund, maybe I would have invested in BitMEX instead of trying to help him raise capital for it. And so I was working on my own startup then, so I didn't invest. So that was one of my bigger mistakes in the industry and missed opportunities. But with SolidX, we were a bit too early on a number of the things we were doing, right? And so didn't execute that well, unfortunately. And we helped a lot of the banks and brokers get into the space. So helped a lot of people get in who are now doing bigger things in the space. Even Van Eck, we pulled in. Now they're doing one of the bigger ETFs. BlackRock, we had met with the executives there. Now they have the biggest ETF in the space. So then I was connected to Novogratz through really a chain of 3 friends of mine, someone who was working for him, who had a couple of years trading experience, but really hadn't had kind of the depth of crypto and hedge fund experience that I had, and 2 other friends that were involved. Also, one was a partner at SolidX, one was running an OTC desk at the time. So they connected me to Novogratz. We sat down on the couch like this and immediately hit it off. And we just saw that, both of us had the right kind of trader instincts, entrepreneurial instincts to approach. We talked about one of our very first conversations. We talked about how to short sell XRP and hedge out the exposure there. And I talked about, he was very surprised that I was doing it on Poloniex, which was one of the biggest exchanges at the time. And we hit it off and immediately decided, he wanted somebody to come in and help him trade his couple of the crypto investments that he made so far. And it was very fortuitous because I came into that seat and started working for him in his family office, and immediately started expanding and doing what I do well of creating chaos, and started to expand all of the crypto investing and exposure, and starting to plant the seeds of running a hedge fund and building a business together, and then to take that company public. And so it all happened in a very quick period of time in 2017. I had helped some of the Canadian banks get into the crypto space. And one of the CEOs there, Harris Fricker of GMP, he was in town, and we started talking about the possibility of going public in the Canadian markets, because in the US markets, the regulations weren't that favorable at the time. And over a 2-3 day period, I sat and was meeting with him on a Friday, Saturday. I forced Novogratz to come and sit down with us, and we met all day on a Sunday. And by the end of that, we decided to go public in Canada. And so that's where, what you mentioned about Galaxy, they recently uplisted to the US markets, but we took the company public at the end of 2017.
In Toronto Stock Exchange, right? So
that's right.
Beautiful. So you basically, you were a pioneer in most of the public offerings, right? The ETFs, the shorting the market, like, you were talking about, like, now we're going to get to the BNB part of the equation, but like, maybe before we go to deeper where your current company, like, any crazy stories? Do you remember like one of the story that actually I'm sure you have plenty to write a book, but one that actually caught your mind and actually changed your paradigm of thinking of how do you look at digital assets overall?
Yeah, there are too many of those. No, and look, and then actually, even now, a close friend of mine just put out a book. I'm forgetting the title right now. George Kikvadze,
Oh,
one of
yeah.
the founders of
Bit
Bitfury.
Fury, yes, of course.
I saw he made an announcement about the book. I think the title might be "And Then You Win," which is a
Yes.
great quote about first they laugh at you, then first they ignore you, then they laugh at you, and then and then you win. And so he has a book that's coming out in the next month or two that's sharing a lot of really incredible stories. So
Are you in the book?
I don't know. He didn't give me a preview, so I don't know. But I know another close friend of ours, Bill Ty, wrote the forward for it, and I read that. And I mean, I've heard a lot of incredible stories and known both of them for over a decade now. And even just in the forward, there were a number of great stories that Bill Ty was sharing. So I can't wait to read that. But the first thing that comes to mind is, and just one of those, because you say about foundational things that shape my thinking. When I was first working with Novogratz, I think on I can't remember exactly what we were doing it for, but some crazy thing that I was probably pulling him into. We had to do a $10 to $20 million transaction on a Saturday night at midnight, and people in the family office, I had to fight with everyone in 2017 to put like 80 to 100 million more into the crypto space, because at the time he'd made a couple of investments, but really wasn't that exposed to crypto. And when we were doing this transaction, right, they couldn't understand. They're like, the markets are closed. You can't send a wire. The banks are closed. I was like, no, we can do it in Bitcoin. And so on a Saturday night at midnight, we made a $10 or $20 million transaction for a cost of $20, right? And it was confirmed in 10 minutes, but really was completed as soon as we sent it. And so it was just one of those things that I actually used that story a number of times throughout that year about the power of crypto and what it was eventually enabling, as we get to now. And now it's become much more, understandable for people and appreciated that, wow, markets can be 24/7, and the movement of money in stablecoins were just a tiny thing that were starting off in 2014 and 15.
Oh, and it should be like
Right.
we look at what's happening in the United States, the Genius Act, the Clarity Act, like all the optimization of financial like structures, like we now get to know that everything that we knew before was antiquated. It just takes time. Like the NASDAQ, the New York Stock Exchange, are like trading with $25 trillion of value every day.
Right.
Now they only like slowly understand, oh wow, we can do 24/7, like cheaper, better, faster. So of course. But you are doing right now like another experiment, I would say another bold experiment. You basically become a CEO of a company that is the biggest treasury holder like in BNB space, right? Being backed by Tangem Capital, a lot of other like great investors, like, one of the top, thought leaders in the space. And tell us a little bit about like how did you even come up with the structure of this deal? Let's begin from the foundation, and then we're going to talk about why it is important and to not only to the BNB holders but overall to the industry.
Sure. So even there, now you had asked kind of about my journey so far, and I'm happy we got to go through some of it, because really, like, I look at it like I've been trying from the beginning to bring together the capital markets and the crypto world, right? First through the ETF, then through taking Galaxy Digital public. There were a couple of other crypto mining businesses that went public then, but Galaxy really was the first of its kind, and it's still the biggest of its kind today. And then I took another company public in Canada in 2021. And so I've been playing and following the capital markets closely, and also understanding the regulatory environments in different markets. Now crypto has always been a very global thing. I'm very appreciative of where I started my career in Hong Kong, and like I consider myself an expat a lot of the time as well. Like I'm a New Yorker and an expat. And so I'm grateful to have very close, dear friends from all over the world. People are always surprised. They're like, wait, how is this possible that you have dear old friends from Latvia and Ukraine and Russia and Georgia and China and Japan and Emirati and all over the world? So it's a very grateful, something I'm humbled by, and very lucky in my life. A lot of that is thanks to the crypto world, by truly how global it is. And
Well,
so,
also a lot of because of your charisma. You're a very
uh,
likable person, smart, so like it's hard not to be friends with you for a long time, right?
thanks. Maybe, I don't know. I've heard that a couple of times at least. So now, the other thing is my friends become like my family, so I hold on to them forever, right? Like I tell people sometimes, with your, husbands, wives, girlfriends, boyfriends, come and go. Kids are forever, and siblings are forever. I know, and so I have fortunate that I have a lot of siblings in my life right now. And so once you become like yourself, and once you become my sibling, my brother, well, it's for life, no matter what. Um, so now to tie it back to it, in this latest wave, and really, this was something from the last cycle that Michael Saylor kicked off with MicroStrategy. We just hit the 5-year anniversary of when he first converted the cash on his balance sheet to
Correct.
Bitcoin.
August 2020.
Yep. And so from that period, he's been the pioneer in utilizing this strategy. Now, a couple of others have actually done similar and copied it. I have a friend, Charles Allen, who founded a company in I believe it was 2014, 15, that he took public. And he was the first public company, I believe, to have Bitcoin and other digital assets on his balance sheet. He had Bitcoin mining equipment and also, Bitcoin direct holdings on his balance sheet. And so even now, he's the company's BTCS, and I caught up with him recently. And so I've been very happy to see he's still a pioneer today. He's actually trying to implement a dividend in Ethereum to actually give out to all of his shareholders. I haven't seen how that'll play out yet. But going back to Michael Saylor, so he kicked off this strategy. I'd been invested on and off throughout the years in MSTR, and then more recently, in the last year, we've seen a couple of these other MicroStrategy competitors around the world really take off. Metaplanet in Japan was the best performing stock in the Japanese market last year. And I think at a number of times, it was actually the most liquid stock as well.
Yeah, but with Metaplanet, as you know, there are a lot of other challenges right now because the stock right now plummeted a little bit. So people now start to criticize this move as like how sustainable on a long run the digital treasuries as a strategy for a publicly traded company. So we're going to talk about like the risk parameters of this, but I love how you pave out also the story and explanation behind why is it important. But because we have a lot of Solana, Ton projects that are doing the same beyond Bitcoin and Ethereum, which is probably now like the dominant, like say, treasury assets, and now BNB. You are probably can say that your company is #1 treasury company, publicly traded company in the world. Is it correct?
As of right now, and I hope for the long term.
So that's already I would say it gives you another pioneer status. Let's come back. How did you decide to choose BNB, as a reserve asset for your company?
Sure. So there's two parts to the story, right? And I appreciate, I like talking about stories and narratives, and so in earlier this year, my friend David Bailey, who founded Bitcoin Magazine, BTC Inc., and the Bitcoin Conference, he launched Nakamoto. And through that process, I immediately shared it with, I think, 13 friends. I said, I'm investing in this. The risk reward's incredible. I love what he's doing. I love the business. I love he's been carrying the Bitcoin flag longer than Michael Saylor and as well as anybody in the world. And I think he's one of the perfect people to run a Bitcoin treasury. And so I shared it with 13 friends. 12 of them decided to invest. They saw my conviction. And I think that's something I've had a lot. When I have conviction in something, usually other people want to invest in it. And so now I shared it with them. Luckily, the 13th person, I helped them invest into SharpLink, which was Joe Lubin's one, focused on Ethereum afterwards. So they're happy as well. And right afterwards, David Bailey, the CEO of Nakamoto, and Hans Thomas, the CEO of 10x Capital, who was an advisor on the Nakamoto deal, they both pulled at me and they said, listen, you're better at this than the management teams and the bankers. We have to have you involved. And so they both talked about me being a board member, partner, getting involved in whatever way I wanted. They were both trying to convince me to run Bitcoin treasuries, and they said they would support me doing it in any market I wanted around the world, right? And so then through those discussions, Hans was a bit more persistent and pulled me into 10x Capital. And the first deal I agreed to kind of start off as an advisor for was this BNB deal. And through that process, he saw me starting to get more and more activated and involved. He was trying to convince me and planting the seeds for me to be the CEO from the beginning. And I was a little hesitant just because, again, I've been mostly in the kind of lower profile backseat. I've been helping put other people in stage and building their companies and selling their companies, but I haven't been really at the forefront for the last couple of years, and especially in a prominent CEO role. And through the process, I was jokingly saying, listen, unless CZ and Gabriel Abed, who's the chairman of Binance, want me to do this and be CEO, I'm not going to do it. Right? And I really was thinking through all these other people and trying to come up with someone else to do it. And ultimately, it got back to me that CZ and Gabe wanted me to do it, and Hans as well. And so now I'm super grateful that they convinced me to step into the role because it is something that, I'm grateful for, and I'm just getting more excited every week about leading this company.
And it's beautiful. But since you mentioned yourself, see, I didn't ask you that. There's a lot of rumors also about like CZ involvement in the project, right? So some people say like it's a great thing because he's a thought leader in the industry, even though he now officially not related to to Binance, right? And of course, the affiliation of the #1 centralized exchange in the world gives a lot of credibility. But others see a risk of monopolist or the big whale involvement in this. Like, what would be your, as a CEO, official reply to this comment?
So what I'd say, and so he is one of my partners in the business. And so Easy Labs, which is the family office of CZ, they're the largest investor into the company. And they're also our partners. And so, for me, it's a very special thing. So I didn't get into the Binance and BNB story and why the BNB, which I'll get into more and more. But really, so it's a story that's kind of been following me now for a lot of my career. So after Galaxy, I had a number of different opportunities come up, I'm sure you can imagine. 2 of them were to be the CEO of FTX US or Binance US. And this is in 2019.
Wow.
And I think, I was thinking they were both good misses, right? Because my friend ended up becoming the CEO of Binance US, and came with a lot of headaches. The regulatory scrutiny back then, even till not so long ago, has been pretty bad. I didn't want to be running a single exchange, and dealing with all those headaches that came with it. I also didn't want to be associated with just one chain or one project. I also had some opportunities to be the CEO of public mining companies and some other things. And then just over a year ago, I was asked by Gabe, by CZ through Gabe, if I'd ever consider running the BNB Foundation, right, or do something else at the foundation level. Now, I have friends who, like Lily Liu at the Solana Foundation, who has done an incredible job there, probably the best of anyone in the world. And so I know plenty of people that are involved with different foundations. I've had other opportunities there come up. And also, I didn't think it was the right mix or the right for me. There are other people that are better suited to run foundations. Then when this came up, and now as it's crystallized, the idea of running this kind of digital asset treasury company, it sort of is the perfect convergence of my skill sets and what I like to do and what I've been trying to do from the beginning of bringing the crypto and capital markets together.
And I think you're definitely a great fit for this. There's not many people who I know who would be a better fit for this.
Thanks.
Now, coming back to, I would say, to the narrative, which is now it's a hot topic, right? People look at Michael Saylor, and MSTR, 500%. The stock is up, their capitalization, their market cap, and the market share is huge. He just became NASDAQ top 100, which is also a huge reputational because not many people heard about MicroStrategy before. Let's be honest, before what they started the Bitcoin as a treasury assets, it was a okay company, and then Michael Saylor was an incredible smart person, but it was not top. So now everybody's having this envy, business envy, a good part of it, that inspires people to look into this. A lot of traditional CFOs are trying to figure out how to do it and how to mitigate the board members into risk management conversation, which is complicated because people who are over 60 to 70, it's not easy for them to understand it. What would be your first advice? Where should you start looking at to make sure that we're going to see much more companies who are doing this, right? So with BNB, maybe with your help or with other assets, what would you advise to even start researching this?
Sure. So, with MicroStrategy, from the beginning, people have been betting against it and trying to scrutinize the model of why anybody would pay a premium to invest in it. And, it's lasted, and he's managed to prove kind of almost everyone wrong along the way that the premium he's commanded in order to accumulate more of the underlying Bitcoin has persisted. And so he's helped now take off a lot of the career risk for CFOs, board members, others for utilizing corporate balance sheets in order to buy into crypto and other Bitcoin and other digital assets. So it's similar to how some of the earliest endowments, I believe Yale and Harvard, are 2 of the endowments here in the US that people follow more closely than anyone else as investors. Once they start to buy into an asset class, it's very easy. It takes away the career risk for any other person in an endowment to follow in their footsteps. So now Michael Saylor, he's both been doing it directly himself, and he's been leading this conference, Bitcoin for Corporates. So he's been kind of trying to teach people and show them, a lot of the value and kind of characteristics of Bitcoin and why it's an interesting asset to do it. What we're seeing is that more and more people around the world and different companies are starting to see and understand that and realize, all right, instead of just holding dollars, right? There's a lot of, for years, for decades, people in other countries around the world at companies have said, well, it's actually better for us to hold dollars than our own local currency. Well, Michael Saylor has been showing people why it's better to hold Bitcoin than dollars. And he's been right. Bitcoin's almost at all-time highs.
Yeah.
So in a similar vein, that same decision-making process for companies around the world of saying, wait, it's better to hold dollars than our local currency. Now they're realizing, well, it's even better to hold Bitcoin or something like BNB. And so now we're starting to see, a number of countries around the world and governments realize that. And we're starting to see quite a few companies pick up on that. And that's only starting to snowball.
No, exactly. And there is also, I would say, this dichotomy between within the crypto industry, where there is a lot of Bitcoin maxis who are following, Michael Saylor religiously, and they're saying, okay, with Bitcoin is the only one, the only, I would say, corporate asset that has the potential to be rolled into publicly traded companies. And now there are more people like yourself who I would say somewhere in the middle, and myself too. I'm a centrist, so to speak. So I'm okay to see Solana, TON, or BNB to have the same, I would say, risk parameter. But how would you explain it to a person, say they're new to Bitcoin, they're trying to accept this part, and now you're introducing, you might as well have a diversified portfolio of multiple assets under one company. What would you say to a CFO who's struggling to even explain it to his board? Maybe some pro tips.
Sure. So, now going back to my, if I was able to tell my earliest self in the crypto space and give some advice, I would have said, the long-term comment, owning things for the long term, but also having fewer assets, because there have been times where, I've really expanded and tried to invest and get exposure to a lot of different things. And I wish I had a bit more concentration, a concentrated portfolio. So I think one of the ways I look at the space now is that, Bitcoin is a lot of different things to different people, but really it's winning at this digital gold narrative, right? Ethereum, which has had a couple of very successful digital asset treasury companies in the last couple months do really well, and the price of Ethereum has almost doubled. Ethereum is kind of this digital oil. Now, BNB, one of the things that's very special, it's a very kind of under-known asset, particularly in the US market.
Mm-hmm.
It happens to be tied to and was started by the founders of the largest exchange in crypto, Binance. It happens to be one of the most widely used and it just has more activity than people can imagine across the entire crypto ecosystem. And I look at it like it's this digital equity infrastructure. Mm-hmm. So it is the asset that's powering one of the biggest utilities in crypto, or biggest kind of activity so far is around trading. And this is an activity that is being used more widely, or it's an asset that's being used more widely by the people that are the most active in the crypto space. And so, another interesting angle here is that Binance itself, even that story, a lot of the Western market is kind of unfamiliar with. Binance has 40% of the trading volumes in the entire crypto market. Coinbase, I think, is around 5 to 7% in the last numbers I saw. So Coinbase is a $100 billion company. Binance, if it were valued or if it were a public company, it might be anywhere from 500 billion to 1 trillion. But there's no way anywhere in the world for people to get exposure to Binance. And BNB happens to be one of the best proxies of potential value from Binance or activity into that. So it happens to be a very special, unique asset that now we're trying to help investors get exposure to.
Yeah, I mean, considering that Binance is number one exchange, as you mentioned, 250 million users, just for someone who's exploring what are the numbers of Binance, and the total value locked in the chain is about $12.5 billion. They have the biggest reserved asset that they showcase publicly on chain. Not a single bank has the same infrastructure. And to your point, the FTX was, of course, I would say, disastrous event for the entire industry. However, the fun fact, I don't know if you probably read it as well, that the returns right now, like, they liquidated all the Solana, but they kept it on the sheet. They now have more assets. They actually reimburse more than 100%.
That's
There's
right.
still more money left in the company. So that's another power of appreciation of in our industry that is very unique. And the fact that after that, Binance was the first to create this reserve, like, that's publicly and very openly showcase that at any given point of time, that your assets will be protected and not a single retail customer will lose money. That is like, we don't see it in any other exchange in the world. I think that is pretty unique what we have. So the question to you, I will ask you another controversial question. Do you think that Binance will go public at some point?
Yeah, I've been asked that, and I honestly don't know. Like, I think as far as I know, the first outside investment into Binance was through MGX, an entity in Abu Dhabi. So they've bought in, and there's some public news about that. I don't know if they will go public, and I don't know if they have to go public, because I think the business is doing very well. As you said, it's actually closer to 290 million users globally.
Oh, wow, already.
And I was putting out a poll, and I was asking people whether they think Binance will get to 300 million users or BNB token will get to $1,000 per BNB first. And I think it was 70 or 80% believe we'll hit 1,000 BNB. Now, the other thing that's kind of interesting about it is CZ has mentioned this publicly, that he actually sees a lot of the value and activity. One of his visions of the future of the crypto space is to move more of that activity towards DEXs, or decentralized exchanges. So looking ahead the next 2 to 5 years, we might actually see the biggest exchanges and the biggest kind of places where value is transacted in decentralized exchanges. And we might even see a lot of traditional equities and stocks trade on those decentralized exchanges. And so if that's the case, more and more of that value won't accrue to Binance or Coinbase or Kraken or any exchange in an IPO. More of it will accrue to the underlying token like BNB.
Oh, I'm sure that will be the case. BNB is right now number 4 in the total value, like in the world, and I think it might become like even topple the Ripple at some point. We don't know, right? But what is more interesting, like coming back to the conversation, is also another big trend, which is tokenization overall. I'm sure you share probably this belief that all the assets eventually will be like on chain. And just a matter of time when we're going to have like full-scale tokenized stocks, bonds, equities. Now, we don't have the proper infrastructure for this as of today, right? So how do you see it will have an effect on the total markets when we're a small industry in comparison to others? $4 trillion, maybe like 4.5 right now, right? Even gold is what, 17 to 19 trillion, depending on how you evaluate, right? So what do you think is going to happen next? Like, what would be this catalyst when the tokenized stocks will become like, a bigger reality, and with the 24/7 markets, like, across the world?
Well, it's going to come with a lot of challenges, but it's going to be exciting. And so even now, I've spent a number of time, I have a lot of reporters asking me, and, conversations with reporters, with people in the crypto space, with people in the traditional finance space. They're all trying to understand, how is this going to work, right? And you have crypto people learning about things and nuances to the equity markets and debt markets that they've never had to before. And you have traditional finance people learning about some of the nuances in the crypto markets. You have reporters that are completely confused and getting everything wrong, right? And at least they're trying to. For a while, like, one of the things that I hate the most is the amount of press you see around, oh, Bitcoin reached this price level, or BNB fell to this price level, and now it's at all-time highs. And so they're a bit too reactive and focus on the price as opposed to the really, like, the heart of it and underlying stories. And when they do, they get those wrong. Now, what's going to be really fascinating is, I think TradFi has resisted for so long, seeing things like tokenized stocks. And they resisted not just because they were worried about crypto, they resisted modernization, right? And so, even it was a big deal for settlement of equities to go from, I think, T+3,
Yes.
so 3-day settlement, to T+1 or T+0, as we're starting to see what crypto enables. And so I think, we're in this kind of friction period where there's a lot of people playing in each other's sandboxes. And then what we're going to see eventually is more and more things that make sense are going to be put into effect. And so the idea of markets trading 24/7, well, there's no reason that they shouldn't, right? No reason that they can't. The FX markets already, they're one of the biggest, most liquid markets globally. Those are pretty close to 24/7. So we'll see other assets start to trade like that and have, as they figure out, the liquidity spectrum as well for it. Then I think, we're going to eventually have other things that are, what I love about crypto is we have some of the most creative and like geniuses of financial engineering and technology trying to figure out these things of what makes sense. Like one of my friends, I think you know as well, David Johnston, he put out, I still love to tell people about this, back in 2014 or 15, one of the first white papers on dApps, decentralized applications.
He coined the term actually himself. Yeah.
And so he put out his phrase, Johnston's Law, which is everything that can become decentralized will become decentralized. So then I was at a talk in Japan, one of my favorite talks I ever gave, where I put a little tweak on it, and I called it Namudaro's Law, or Namdar's Law. And it was everything that should be decentralized will be decentralized, right? Just changing the one word can to should, because well, it was my own little tweak, but I feel like not everything has to be decentralized. Certain things, can continue to operate as they are. But everything that should be decentralized and will lead towards a much more efficient future. And so we're dealing with that with the public markets and financial markets today. And we're also, we'll eventually see things like GP and LP interest in funds. We'll see things as, we've seen in parts of Asia here, some limited starts of like trading fan tokens on future income of athletes or celebrities, or, around that movie exchange where you could bet on the future revenue of a movie. So we'll start to see crypto is going to enable the financialization of all these interesting and unique assets.
So yeah, I can tell you're also a big believer, like, what's going to be the bright future of crypto. I mean, David was also on my podcast,
great.
where we had an episode together. And yeah, he's now one of the core contributors of Morpheus, which is another topic. If you want to see the podcast yourself, welcome you to. There's a 1 hour, very intelligent conversation from him. Coming back to, again, to specifically, like, the BNC, the new ticker? It was before it was Vape, right?
Right.
So can you also explain, like, what did the company did before? What is it like? What was the transition period for the new ticker, and how one can invest, and why predominantly they should invest?
Sure. So at CEA Industries and kind of the Treasury business, we're using the name BNB Network Company. So that had been around, and it had a series of vape stores that we have, and also kind of agricultural equipment. And so, those continue to operate today, and they're a core part of the business. But we're now, adding on this BNB Focus Treasury strategy. And so it's a bit similar to these other digital asset treasuries that had a core business, and then they brought in some additional equity capital, and then started to add on this treasury strategy. And that turns out a lot of the time to be a more and more important focus of the business. And so that's really what I'm most focused and most excited about today, and what I'm out there sharing a lot about. And the key thing there is BNB is still a very difficult to access asset, that it's not trading on most US exchanges. There's no BNB ETF. And so what we're trying to do is really provide the best institutional grade way for retail and institutional investors to get exposure to BNB and get exposure to the BNB Treasury strategy that we're running in a NASDAQ listing, and in an easy, compliant way for people to get that exposure. And so, for me, it's very exciting because, like I was saying, the Binance and BNB story has followed me a number of times in my career. And it's actually something that, I'll always be a Bitcoiner, right? I'll happily carry the Bitcoin flag for the rest of my life. And I plan to continue. And with, I invested in Nakamoto, and with my partners at 10x Capital, they're going to be out there seeding and supporting Bitcoin treasuries around the world, right? For me, I couldn't be happier to now take and help people see and expose them to the BNB story, because it's just, I get to open people's eyes to something I've seen and what I've been doing my whole career, right? Where I see how important the global markets are to crypto. BNB is perhaps the most global asset to in the crypto world, other than Bitcoin. And in some ways more so than Bitcoin, because, on a daily basis, you have more people using BNB off-chain through Binance than you do Bitcoin even, I believe. And so, I get to help expose people that, explain the unique properties of it, how, the value that might accrue to BNB over time, And for us, having a significant amount of BNB on our balance sheet, as you said, we're the largest today holder of BNB in the world, and hopefully the largest holder of any treasury in the world. And hopefully we can continue to maintain that lead. Now, I expect as part of this process, as I'm out there sharing this story and other people who've been deeply involved in the BNB chain ecosystem, there's going to be other copycats, and there'll be other treasury companies. And my approach has always been to be super collaborative. Everybody else who's out there tapping public markets capital and creating opportunities for people to get exposure to BNB, right? I plan to support and help and speak to and kind of lead the way. And, I expect to see, similar to what's happened with Ethereum and with a number of the Ethereum focused treasury companies, I expect to see the same play out with BNB. And I think you mentioned XRP and Ripple. In my mind, it won't be very long before BNB surpasses XRP.
Okay, we have a bet now. Like, I love it. When?
The when is trickier, but because what I've realized with XRP has been a funny one that people in the crypto space love to hate, although people outside of the crypto space somehow love to love it. And so they've done an incredible job navigating through some difficult regulatory environments. But if I had to put a prediction, I'd say I think it could happen before the end of the year or within the next 3 to 6 months.
Wow, this year. That's a very bullish prediction. I love it.
Well, what I can tell you is in the past month and a half, BNB has managed to outperform Bitcoin, Ethereum, and XRP. So if the trend continues, it's very possible.
Well, it's true. And this is ironic. A lot of people don't understand that, like, you have, I would say, active portfolio management in crypto where you can trade, sell, short, and you have buy and hold position. And ironically, there's many like publicly available information. You can even use like any ChatGPT to see it, that buy and hold like of Bitcoin, of BNB and other like top 10, I would say, usually outperforms active strategies, right? The question is, as you mentioned, since 2011, how many people actually are ready to set, let's say, keep the 5 to 10 year horizon perspective, right? And there's very few. People want to gain, like they have 2-3x and they want to liquidate the position and get their like profits, right? And only few will look at it as like, and as institutional investors, like what will happen in 10 years horizon? That's your typical State Street, Vanguard, BlackRocks of the world, right? So for institutions, it's very clear what you're doing is unique because they don't have access other than buying the stocks, publicly traded company like yours, right? But what about the retail? What would you recommend someone who's listening to you for the first time and they're like, wow, it's exciting. Now I cannot go to Binance in US. I cannot go to OKX and many other exchanges. I can buy like, the ticker, we're going to say.
The current ticker, BNC.
BNC, which was also, there's a unique story about the BNC because it was the first name of Binance, like the ticker, right?
So BNC was the original ticker of Binance Coin when it was first introduced in 2017, I believe.
And why was it not adopted?
No, so it just had evolved over the years from BNC to BSC, Binance Smart Chain, to now where it exists as BNB for BNB Chain.
So this is a smart. So how and where they can buy BNC now?
So BNC, it trades in the public markets. It's NASDAQ listed. Now, what's been interesting, similar with one of the other treasury companies, Nakamoto, the capital markets and some of the brokers sometimes make it difficult for people to access it. When they see these new companies, when they see spikes in volatility. So we've had periods where, I've seen, because I invest in a handful of the treasury companies myself. So occasionally it's been through Schwab or Fidelity or Robinhood. There have been periods where it's been hard for people to buy it. I think recently one of the issues we had on Schwab, I was told that that's cleared up. So it's available to buy and sell on Schwab. I think on Robinhood as well. And so on most US brokers accounts, it's available.
You're not afraid that there will be a situation with like a GameStop type of situation?
Afraid in what way?
That you're going to do too well.
It's GameStop. Look, they've actually recently been trying to convert and follow this trend, and I think they raised a pipe recently in order to put that into Bitcoin. So I think what the GameStop phenomenon has been an incredible one. I followed that closely. I watched the movie recently too, and what I love about that is between GameStop community and Reddit and Wall Street Bets and all these different communities, it actually, it overlaps very closely with, a lot of the mentality you have in crypto of kind of empowering retail traders and retail investors, to bring capital to things that make sense and to go up against, there's a lot of this kind of, David versus Goliath, right, mentality, where now we see that the Davids of the world in the crypto space and the public markets actually have a chance to beat and outperform a lot of the biggest institutional investors that really don't see what the kind of like retail masses are bringing to the table.
I love how you're like, David and Goliath.
Yeah.
So you're David.
Does that make you Goliath? So, no, I won't put that on you.
Hopefully not.
Yeah.
Hopefully not. Like, so I identify as David in
There you
in
go.
this structure. Coming back to the perspective of where do you see, like right now it's still very early. I think it's like less than 1% of publicly traded companies are experimenting with, which is like nothing, like, in the I would say wide ocean of opportunities that we can see in the future. So there's a lot of articles that are talking about like what's going to happen when it's going to get to 5 to 10%. What amount of $1 trillion of new liquidity will come into the market. So do you foresee is going to happen, let's say, in the coming 2 to 3 years? And what would be the pivotal catalyst for this to happen?
Sure. So I think, going back to that first research report I put out in 2014 and some of the earliest people in the crypto space, I remember these conversations that we were dreaming up a lot of the things that are happening today. We were dreaming up of an ETF getting approved, right? We were dreaming up governments one day wanting to buy Bitcoin and other digital assets. We didn't foresee this idea of companies kind of enacting entire strategies focused on accumulating those assets, right? Like what we're seeing with the digital asset treasuries today, because we didn't understand what was possible in the capital markets back then. We thought companies might take their idle cash to use it, but we didn't think that they'd actually raise additional cash and dollars in order to buy the underlying digital asset. So that's been a kind of unique and interesting phenomenon today. Now, one of the things I like to point out to people is, look, the crypto market today is, as you said, $4 trillion. If this grows the way we think it can and becomes 10, 20, $50 trillion of value, well, what does that mean? That means there's more value to be created ahead versus behind. So a lot of times people ask, oh, is it too late? Bitcoin is at this price, BNB is at this price. And I tell them there's still plenty more opportunity and more value to be created ahead. So I always try to kind of help open up people's eyes to that massive opportunity. And I'll tell them what I love about it too is that, two lines I'd come up with over the years. One, crypto is the most meritocratic game the world's ever seen, right? Where the more opportunity, the more energy you pour into it, somebody who goes and spends a month heads down researching, learning about any particular asset, Bitcoin, BNB, Solana, Ethereum, they can all of a sudden know more of the relevant information than anybody who's been following it for a number of years. And it's also the greatest non-zero sum game the world's ever seen. Because we're actually going and looking into all of these existing financial kind of instruments and asset classes and institutions and thinking, wait, how can this be done better? And people are looking at ways to create value and grow the pie. And so that's something of really like what I love about the crypto space and helping people get into it is seeing that and seeing that potential.
100%. And then the question to you, I think, like, will be important for someone who's hearing still like they're confused because they're here for the first time that this is even possible to actually take BNB or any other crypto asset and take it part of the publicly traded company. What are the risks? How would you calculate the net asset value of the company? What is the upside? For, let's say, for retail investors who are hearing it, they're like, oh, I'm still not sure, like, whether I should do it or not, like, because it's very volatile. And many other myths like they have, like, how would you explain it to them in a simplified way?
Sure. So one of the very first things I've been trying to caution people about is when they see the announcement of a company that putting their plans to launch a digital asset treasury strategy, not to buy right away. Because we've seen some of these small cap stocks shoot up in price 5, 10, 20x the price of before the announcement. And almost always, I think every single time actually, the price ends up crashing back down. So really, not chasing things and buying into the hype, right? And then trying to figure out, as you bring out this concept of net asset value, of understanding when a company is running this digital asset treasury strategy, right? They're buying the underlying token. And so for every share of equity, if you're paying, like with MicroStrategy, if you're paying $330 for a share of MicroStrategy today, you have somewhere around 70% of that value of underlying Bitcoin per share, right? So you're buying in at about a 50% premium today. Now that premium over the last couple of years has traded, I think, anywhere from, briefly traded negative, and it's also traded as high as 200%. I think the average premium has been somewhere between 70 to 100%. So when you look into all these other digital asset treasuries, including BNC, in looking at the net asset value of the underlying stock and paying some reasonable premium over time is what I think appropriate. And as I invest into some of these, that's how I look at it, but not chasing the hype and paying 3, 5, 10 times multiple on what the underlying asset is, because the hope is that you're paying a premium and you're buying into the company to give that management team the opportunity to buy and accumulate more of that underlying asset and to kind of get this flywheel concept going. There's actually one of my investors and a VC in the space, Breed VC, wrote a great piece. And I think they called it the strategy proliferation, right? And so I think there's a number of good things out there that you can find information about like this concept of the treasury strategy.
And for the critics who consistently say like, okay, well, Saylor built like this machine of like, lending for almost like 0%, like, and then like putting it under like, the balance sheet, so the average price still works out, but there was some moment in time that it might stop working out. And then what he's doing essentially is diluting the previous investors, right? So there's a lot of people who are a bit concerned about this type of strategy. And again, eventually it can blow up. Like, what would you reply to these people?
So when I was at the Bitcoin conference earlier in the year, when I saw you there, one of the kind of my most important takeaways was what I heard Michael Saylor say in answering some of those questions about what would happen if his MNAV went negative.
Yeah.
And he calmly said, well, if anybody was willing to sell $1 for less than $1, I would just issue some preferred shares and I'd buy that back. And all of our common investors and me, we would all benefit from buying those assets for less than $1. And so I think that was an answer that gave me a lot of confidence. And actually, one of the important things when you're running one of these treasury strategies is your ability to access capital in good times and bad times. And so even, going back to BNC, in my earliest conversations with CZ and the family office, Easy Labs, and my partner Hans at 10X, in every conversation I had, they were talking about and thinking about the medium and long term. All right, what happens when this happens? What do we do when this happens? And they've been investing for the long term in AI and robotics, and in the crypto space. And, I tell people actually, one of the lines I like to say, CZ is perhaps the most important person in the crypto space, not named Satoshi. And what I mean by that is, he's the most public person today that's well known, and he's been actively one of the best participants in the industry. Every time there's volatility, he's telling people to focus on HODL and BIDL, focus on building, zoom out, don't get shaken out by the volatility. And he's been right. Bitcoin's close to all-time highs. BNB's very close to all-time highs.
What I would ask you also on a personal level, because we can talk about the strategy and the markets and life. How do you define wealth? What is wealth for you on a personal level?
So that's where, look, like, I think you've seen a lot of my journey. I've had some successes, I've had some failures, made and lost fortunes, a handful of things that, I held on to early on that I wish I still held on to today. And so, I've also unfortunately been very trusting in my life and career, and I've had a couple of people take advantage of that publicly and painfully. But I think today, and I mean this on a real level, like one of the ways that I really value kind of and derive my own wealth is in terms of my reputation, my relationships. That I'm very fortunate to have quite a few people like yourself I consider like my brothers and my sisters, and so the love that I get and the closeness from those relationships, right? It's enhanced my life like more than any monetary value can. And so, and I really mean that honestly. And I think that's something too, as you mentioned, like my genuineness and appreciation of the people in my life and all that. Now, fortunately, I also have a very strong reputation. I think as I'm out there now more publicly, it's definitely been a new experience for me. Like I've had other friends who've been out there and taken on very public roles, and I've seen them, and it takes a lot. You have to be very committed to it. You have to kind of give up a lot of your personal privacy. But there's a lot of things that are rewarding from doing that. And so, in terms of actually like gives me a bigger podium to help a lot more people in the space. Maybe I can protect some people from making a mistake with certain investments, and who knows what other kind of things come up. And so for me, the other way I look at wealth is actually this idea of like, the more I'm able to help people around the world make money so that I have friends that are kind of refusing to let me pay for dinner, right? That's what wealth is to me.
I mean, I agree. That's good to fight to pay for the dinner. And in your opinion, where we are right now, 2000, like almost like last part of 2025, so where do you see the biggest blind spot? Where is the biggest gap in the industry? And so where do you see the biggest opportunity for people who are entering only now, institutions or retail? You can attack both.
Sure. So I think what happens in the industry a lot is people get very excited about one thing and they start chasing it. And so you see a lot of capital and, throughout different cycles, we've seen it. People got excited about hardware companies and hardware wallets, and then they get excited about miners, and all these different things kind of people get overhyped and too excited. Now we're seeing a lot of hype and excitement around digital asset treasuries, but really I myself, I've kind of revised up my expectations there. I was saying earlier in this year that I thought somewhere between 50 to 100 billion of capital is going to come into the crypto space through digital asset treasury companies. Now I've kind of revised that higher, and I think it's going to be more like 100 to 200 billion over the next year. So I think that means about 10 billion per month. And what's interesting, and the reason why I revised it higher, is because what I've seen is even if you get a little pullback in the markets and all of a sudden the US capital markets slow down, so maybe there's only 2 or 3 or 5 billion of capital raised this month. Well, the opportunity for the capital markets or kind of the financial piping to turn on in Japan or China or Korea or Dubai, Abu Dhabi, Germany, Poland, any other financial market can turn on, and we might see 1 billion, 3 billion, 5 billion pour into that market. And so it really, like, what excites me is just the truly global nature of this. And I see the US as being kind of the most liquid piping in the world, right? With the most water, the most stuff gushing through it. But at the same time, the world's like the global financial markets are now interacting with crypto in a way that they haven't before. And so that's why I'm pretty excited about the next year or two and where this is going to take us.
Exciting. And what are you most optimistic about in the coming 5 to 10 years?
Well, one of the things I like to joke around sometimes, about is, listen, sometimes if I'm talking to somebody that's very skeptical about crypto, I say, you know what, maybe you're right. All right, maybe all the people and all the smart people and wealthy people who've jumped into this and have been following crypto or helping to build crypto over the years, maybe they're all wrong. And maybe crypto is just going to be something for when the singularity is achieved and AI and our robot masters come in. Maybe it's for them, and whoever has crypto, they'll treat a little bit better. Right now, I actually am an optimist. An early lesson I learned in my career. I started my career at UBS in Hong Kong, kind of in the middle of the financial crisis. And I worked with a number of people there that were very optimistic. And so I learned early in my career, optimism pays better than pessimism. So I'm very optimistic today. And I think, what the efficiencies and the incredible things that AI is going to unlock, as we're starting to see with LLMs that are widespread, but also with AI agents, and now with AI interacting with the crypto space, I think is going to be a lot of really special applications where, AI agents can't KYC, right? So in some ways, all of this activity that's going to be and we can't even imagine just how much activity there's going to be on the internet and through AI and AI agents. Well, I look at that all of that has to go through crypto, right? And I even was bringing up that, when I think about some of the different assets, going back for a sec to BNB, that the Ethereum story is really caught on recently, and a lot of people are focused on stable coins. We had Circle do their IPO recently, and everyone's thinking that, Ethereum is where stable coins are going to live and exist. And so the Wall Street's gotten excited by that story. Well, there's actually more stablecoin activity, although it's a lower dollar value right now, but also it's cheaper on BNB and more growth there. I also think that BNB might be the chain that wins in AI and robotics. So when we get into trillions and trillions of transactions, Ethereum's too expensive, Bitcoin's too expensive, BNB might be the chain that wins on that.
It's a bold prediction, but I would love to see that. I mean, we've seen even with example of Coinbase, launched the agent that actually works already. It can already conduct transactions with just one command. And then this is impressive. I'm sure I know in the Binance ecosystem there's a lot of other initiatives to this point. And right now, just to make it fun, I decided we're gonna do a blitz, right? So you have one sentence to reply, like maybe I'll give you like 1.5 max, right? And so you have to be fast and don't think too hard. Okay, just intuitively reply what you think. So if you have to describe already crypto journey in one word, what would it be and why?
Chaos.
And why?
A lot of ups and downs, but it's been a wonderful journey.
Beautiful. What habits or practices keep you grounded while building in such a volatile space?
Meditation and perspective, and friends, very good friends that, fortunately, I get a lot of good feedback and a lot of sounding boards with different friends who have other deep experience.
Is there a practice, philosophy, or life lesson that's influenced how you invest and live?
Interesting one. I'd say also perspective. That I think I've been very fortunate to be exposed, as I mentioned, to like people from all over the world, and just appreciating all of the beautiful nuances to every different culture has really opened up my eyes to the world.
Looking forward, what legacy do you want to live as a founder, investor, and a person?
It's a great question. I hope that I'm always someone that's known for like being very loving and really just exuding light, that I hope to be a force of light in the world.
Wow. That's beautiful. One life hack that changed you dramatically.
Drinking a lot of water and creatine.
Yeah, we're gonna have this after the interview. We've both lived through brutal, drawdowns, like in the space, trusted a lot of people who probably not supposed to be trusted. Personally, what was the hardest moment in crypto for you, and how did it change you?
I've been hurt a number of times, and by people I trusted, and I love trusting people, and I want to trust people, and so I think one of the best things for me is that I've told people that like I'm going to continue to be the way I am. I do things on a handshake. I love to trust people, and I do. But what I've learned is that I need to trust my own instincts as well. So as soon as someone gives me a reason not to trust them, I know to put more diligence on papering things up.
What was the false conviction you once held about crypto that you later had to unlearn?
That diversifying and believing that too many of these smaller cap coins may end up really succeeding and outperforming, and versus having more of a focus and kind of a focused portfolio.
Has there been a time when walking away from an opportunity turned out to be one of your best decisions?
Too many to count. Too many to count. I've had a lot of quirky like things you can imagine come up. And yeah, fortunately, I've had a lot of good misses.
Is there a book, film, or even a childhood story you return to when you need a perspective?
The first one that comes to mind there was actually a book that spurred me to start writing my own book maybe 20 years ago. It's not how good you are, it's how good you want to be. I think it was by Paul Arden. And I actually have a book that's, hopefully it'll be finished one day. And the current title of the book is Why Not? And it's all about perspectives.
Beautiful. I mean, we definitely have to.
You're in it.
What do you want your kids or the next generation of founders to understand about money and risk that most people get wrong?
I think this idea about that it's non-zero sum, and that people sometimes, and some people refer to this as having an abundance mindset. That one of the beautiful parts about money and life and this existence that we have is that people can go out there and create value, right? And especially if you do it and you're good-hearted and you do it in the right way with strong ethics, there's a lot of an endless opportunity to create value and grow the pie.
And the last one is like my bonus question always. What is the meaning of life to you, David?
42. No, I've heard that recently. The meaning of life, it's something I've struggled with a lot. There was a concept I came up with right after I came out of Vipassana, which I did a couple of years ago.
10 days?
10 days, full 10-day meditation, 10 hours a day. First time in my life I ever did it. And I came up with this acronym coming out of it. I've never shared this before. LCHI, LCHI. And the idea is to live, create, and have impact.
Wow, this is beautiful. Like, I'm honored that I'm the first person you reveal it to, and then to all the people who are going to listen to this. Look, we can talk for hours and hours. Like, I would love to have you more for sure. Once you release the book, you promise that I'm going to be one of the first people you're going to tell it. Like, we're going to have a second episode. But meanwhile, really appreciate your perspective. I think you're one of the few people who I can not only I appreciate as a professional, but also as a friend. And I sincerely wish you luck in everything you're doing. I'm sure your publicly traded company will be successful, and then you're going to show us a great example of, for the future generations, how to take BNB and put it under the publicly traded company.
Oh, thank you so much. This has really been wonderful. I'm so happy to finally be here with you, dude.
Thank you.